Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from or if you are watching us on replay. This is the Awesome Journey. And what we do here is bring incredible people to share their unique stories and challenges because, let's be honest, we are all united in our personal journeys. And I'm your host, Kelly Steinica, with my special guest co host, Kindra Maples. And with our very special guest, Chris Hennessy, who is the owner and executive producer of Hit Productions, the Yoda of live streaming. And right now, he's not searching for a snack, but that tends to be a thing he does regularly.
Oh, I have
And
snacks, believe me.
of course, you do. And I want to spend as much time with Chris's story today because it's incredible. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to my special guest co-host, Kindra Maples.
Yay! I'm so excited I get to spend this time with you. Obviously, I love Christy as well, but I do like that she's gone and she's traveling, and then I get to hang out with you a little bit. So I am so excited to join you again today, Kelly. We had the chance to touch base with Chris, and he's so fitting for this conversation of the awesome journey, right? Everyone's got a different journey and maybe a different pivot point of what happened in their life to cause that journey to happen and to shift. And Chris is a perfect example. So, Chris, I want to jump into it with you. I know we're going to talk about your production stuff and that, but I want to jump in first to you as a human. Um, we don't have to worry about the snacking. I ate my snacks already. So we're good. you're my you're my soulmate on the snacking side. So I got my snack out of the way. But I want to kick it to you and have you tell us a little bit about you and your journey. And obviously, we know there's a big pivot point in your journey and what led it to be this awesome journey. So I'm going to kick it to you, bud.
All right, cool. Thank you. Thank y'all so much for having me on. Sorry, I was a little distracted there. The original event link that I was on was not working, so I was on Kelly's profile trying to find where we were live. We are live on Kelly's profile because I always have it pulled up on the other screen. So yeah, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. It's really an honor to be here. I haven't guested on as many lives as I would really like. So anytime I get the chance, I just kind of jump at it. Man, where do y'all want me to start? I didn't even
Just tell us you. I mean, you can give us that summary that you kind of gave Kelly and I before, and then obviously there's
okay.
pieces of it that we can dive into. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started
So
at the beginning of your young journey into where it led, what awesome place it led you to.
okay. So I grew up in a really strong Christian household. My parents were great. They're still married today. They've been married since 75, so almost 50 years. Um, was a cop for a little while. I worked in the county jail for 3 years, and I went to police academy and became a cop in a small town about 10 miles south of where I live now. Didn't last very long as a cop. Got into some trouble behind some drug-related stuff. I was partying a lot, drinking and doing all the things, which led to drugs, which led to me getting caught doing some really incredibly stupid stuff, and ended up going to prison on a 15-year sentence that I did a little over 8 years on. But and I said this when we talked yesterday, but I say it to everybody I talk to. I hate that I had to go to prison, but I wouldn't trade those 8 years for anything, because it was while I was in prison that I really came to know what it was like to have a relationship with the Lord. Like, like I said, I grew up in church, grew up in a really strong Christian household, but it was still more of a just follow the rules kind of thing, not because I wanted to, but because it was what you did and it was the right thing to do. But it was while I was in prison that God really revealed himself to me in a new way. I'll never forget that pivotal moment, the thing that was the beginning of this shift. Because before that, I'd been locked up for about a year, a little over a year, and I'm still thinking, I I'm still thinking, well, I can do drugs on the weekends now. I have it under control. Uh, I'm smarter now. That's how it started though. It was $25 worth of dope on the weekends. So I was at church. I was sitting in the chapel. One of the volunteers had brought an iPod with a video of Jesus Culture singing the song How He Loves. And I'd never heard it before. I'd never heard of Jesus Culture, didn't know who Kim Walker Smith was. But as she was singing it, I'm sitting there in that chapel with 50 or 60 other guys, and just I felt God's love just wash over me. And I just was sitting there weeping because I had never experienced that before. But it was like a light bulb clicked, and I was like, oh, he really does love us. This is what he means when he says he loves us. So that was the beginning of the end of all my craziness. Because it shifted how I looked at everything. Like I remember going back to my dorm and just laying in my bed and just basking in what that felt like. Like, wow. Time rocked on. I went to a different unit. They started a faith-based dorm on that unit where guys come into the dorm. There's mandatory classes you have to go to. It was a Christian-based curriculum, mainly because the Christians had more volunteers than any of the other religions. So it was a Christian-based curriculum. It was open to all faiths. But while I was there, it was so cool. Like it was definitely a God thing. There's no way to say it wasn't. I was in Navasota, Texas, which is an hour-ish from Houston. And there were volunteers from all over the area that were coming in volunteering for the classes. And 3 or 4 of the different volunteers were all teaching on your identity in Christ and what it means to really be free. The Bible says a lot of good things about us. It says we're kings and priests. There's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. We're above and not beneath. We're the head and not the tail. It says all these good things about us. It doesn't say we're a felon. It doesn't say we're a drug addict. It doesn't say we're, doomed forever because we made a mistake and went to prison. It says the exact opposite of that. So God was just pouring that over me and the rest of the guys that were in the dorm for a period of about 2 to 3 years. And I gave this definition whenever I did my story on ending the stigma, that freedom, I did find my freedom in my faith in the Lord, but it was also, most people define freedom as the absence of something. As the absence of something. So like the absence of bars, the absence of, razor wire and fences, the absence of depression, the absence of addiction or whatever. But the Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So freedom isn't really defined as the absence of something. It's defined as the presence of someone in your life. And that was a paradigm shift for me too, because it was like all of a sudden the bars didn't matter anymore. The walls didn't matter anymore. The razor wire didn't matter anymore. None of that mattered because I really was free. So it was just this amazing period of time in the faith-based dorm. I was in there for 4 years. That God was just pouring all this into me, working on my life, cleaning me up, getting me ready to get out. And when I got out 7 years ago. I just celebrated my seventh year anniversary on the 19th. Yes. Yeah, I know. Woohoo. And I didn't even realize it. Like usually I remember it every year, but I didn't even realize it till like 10 or 11 in the morning. I had to type the date into something. And I was like, why is 519 so familiar? It took it a minute to register. Oh yeah, I got out of prison 7 years ago today. 5/19/16. And I got off parole February 23rd of this year. So I am done with all of it, like totally free. My debt to the state of Texas is paid, which is just an amazing feeling. So
And you
that's kind
immediately
of my
got your
story.
voter's registration
I
card,
did.
correct?
That was cool. Like the state of Texas doesn't get much right. They're not proactive about much. Historically, TDCJ, which is the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, is a very reactive. The state in general is a very reactive kind of organization, right? They're not always real proactive. So I got a letter in the mail last week saying my voting rights had been restored, and they even included a voter registration card for me to send in. So I thought that was pretty cool. I haven't sent it in yet. I'm going to, but yeah, it was pretty exciting.
I I think
That's
one of
good.
the things that definitely stood out to me for that, finding your true freedom in your faith in the Lord is just it feels even more powerful because you put that over my freedom was getting out of the gray motel.
Hmm.
Most people would definitely see that as like, well, that would be what you should be rejoicing in. So I
Right.
just think it's such a beautiful message. And one of the other things I know that we talked about a little bit is once you are back on the outside,
Hmm.
especially, starting in law enforcement and then being in prison for that long, what was the transition like after you got home?
Being in law enforcement and being in prison was not as bad as what I originally thought it was going to be. Because you hear stories, about what they do to cops in prison, but they
Oh, yeah.
also don't put ex cops on rock and roll units. They put them on really laid back units where the chances of them getting smashed are pretty low. So that was an answer to prayer too. Um, but the unit they put me on, it was a medical unit slash protective custody unit without really being in SEG, true protective custody. So there was a lot of ex gang members there that had disassociated with gangs, a lot of ex cops and ex judges and ex TDC guards and things like that. But it was also a medical unit. So the average age was like 50 or 60 years old. There's guys in wheelchairs and walkers and all that kind of stuff. So it was really a low key unit. Um, Something I forgot to mention too, like whenever I was at the first unit I was on was a transfer unit. TDC does that. They send you there for like 22 months before they put you on your permanent unit. And while I was there, I prayed for a unit close to home because I was 5 hours away from my family, 4 hours away from my family. I wanted a unit with dorms. I didn't want to be in a 2-man cell with somebody all the time. I didn't mind being in a 50-man dorm because you have your own little cubicle. It's your own little space. You don't have to share it with anybody. The dude may be right there, but you don't have to share your space with anybody.
Mhm.
And I wanted a laid back unit. And when they transferred me from Choice Moore to Pack, I ended up an hour away from home. The entire unit was dorms with cubicles. There were no cells at all. And it was super laid back. So God had his hand on me from the very beginning. Um, but getting out was a huge transition because you feel like you're walking around with an L on your or an F on your forehead, an L on your forehead, smash mouth, an F on your forehead that says you're a felon. Because I remember like going to the grocery store. In prison you can't put your hands in your pockets. It's against the
Mm.
rules to walk down the hallway with your hands in your pockets. If you do, they'll pull you over and pat you down because they think you might be holding something you're not supposed to or whatever. I remember walking around the grocery store and put my hands in my pockets and then pulling them back out because I didn't want the workers thinking I was stealing something. Like little stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, I had an ankle monitor on, so if I wore shorts in public, it was obvious. I generally didn't because I was still, the first 2 months, you're kind of, it's a big transition to come back because you're used to people telling you what to do. When
Mhm.
you can shower, you're showering with 150 other dudes. Um, they run you in there like literally like cows, and your shower. It's a community shower. Telling you when you have to go to bed, all the things, right? So having that freedom again was just a huge transition.
Mhm.
And just to kind of put it into perspective, when I went in, the iPhone 1 had just come out. Nobody had them. Everybody still had a Motorola Razor. When I got out, the iPhone 7 came out. So think how much technology had changed
Mm.
in that 8 years. Everybody had high speed internet. And like that wasn't a thing whenever I went in. It wasn't
Mhm.
dial up, but still not everybody had it. It was just, it was an adjustment for sure. But like I had a real good support system. I stayed with my granddad for the first year, probably year and a half almost. Um, my parents lived on the same property, and I didn't go to work for almost 6 months. I just kind of chilled. It was like 5 or 6 months. I chilled. I worked around the property. We have 40 acres in the country. So I was helping my granddad do stuff. I was riding the four wheeler in the woods, roaming the same woods I roamed as a kid, and just kind of adjusted to getting back out into society before I got so busy with the job and all that kind of stuff. I didn't even get my driver's license till like September, and I got out in May.
Mhm.
Um, so it was definitely an adjustment.
Yeah.
But
I think.
I
is
had
so.
a no. Go ahead.
I think it's so important of what you just said about, spending those 6 months chilling, but you were with your family, going to places that you went as a child. I just think that's so powerful. You were
Mm-hmm.
reconnecting with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And then you were the one who had to take those next steps. And so my question actually goes along with the question that Kelly just put up there. Andrea had a question of, yes, you had God supporting you and whatnot, but is it not that you had to make the choice? And we talked about
Oh,
this
for
a little
sure.
bit before, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've partnered a lot with some of the organizations out here, at least in Arizona, that support inmates learning a skill and then support them transitioning out. And you weren't part of any of that. So,
Mm-mm.
yes, there is this support from God that you had, but then there is this other part, right? To Andrea's question of you have to do the things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe he's got your back, but you have to do the things. And so talk to us about that. Like you weren't part of a program. You
Right.
were just maneuvering through all of this on your own. Even like you said, the example of walking through the store. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
it really is like you were in this capsule and then they threw you back out.
It's exactly
How
what it is.
right?
Yeah.
Like talk to
Good
us
luck.
about yeah, about that and the fact that you weren't part of a transition program or anything.
Yes.
Yep. So yeah, I didn't go through any kind of transition program. I didn't need it really, because I had such a good support system, and I realized not everybody has that, and I say that with all the humility and realizing that I was really very blessed. But you're absolutely right. Like you can't live on, by the time I got out, that experience I'd had with the Lord was 7 years ago. Um, in the chapel, I'd been away from the faith-based storm for about 6 months because I went to a different unit. I went through a rehab program um, at that unit before I got out. So I was very far removed from that and all the brotherhood and camaraderie I had with the guys in the dorm. But you can't live on the highs, forever. That's not going to carry you forever. You have to. I believe God does stuff like that to reveal Himself to us or to prod us in the right direction, to reveal Himself to us in a new way. But that doesn't force you to stay right.
Mhm,
That's not you. That's not what's going to keep you right. You have to make the decision that, you know, I'm going to take these steps. It's just you have to make up your mind you're going to do it. It would have been real easy for me to go back to doing drugs. I know where the people live. I've seen them in Walmart. Like it would have been real easy to do that, but I
mhm,
had my mind made up that that was something I was never going to do again. Um, that life is not for me, and it doesn't bring anything but pain and destruction. So you definitely have to have your mind made up, um, and don't, like I said, just don't live on the high from 7 years ago. It's not going to last. Just like the fear of going to prison is not really enough to keep you out of prison once you've been out for a while. It
mhm,
fades, right? Um, it becomes a distant memory. Now,
And
7 years after getting out, that is still not a distant enough memory for me to think about doing drugs. But I also know it's not just prison; it's my family members that I hurt, um,
mm,
just the condition my life was in. Like it was nuts. I didn't have anywhere to stay. Trucks getting repoed. I'm falling asleep at the wheel because I've been up for 4 or 5 days. I've wrecked a couple of times, but not bad enough where it was I hurt myself or the vehicle real bad.
mhm,
But it could have been worse. So
mhm.
just knowing that just the destruction it brought to my life, that is what has kept me clean and straight.
and honestly, that is something to truly be celebrated because there are so many that when they get out, because like you said, Kendra, and I think that's a great example, just like, here you go, dropping out. You're
Mhm,
back out there. Good luck and figure it out. That you can lead back down those old patterns and paths where you used to be comfortable because a comfort zone doesn't have to be pretty, because drug use is not pretty.
mhm,
But it could be a very easy place to slide back into.
Hmm.
So, what a great thing that you were able to have such a strong mindset, and of course, your faith to guide you to be like, I'm never doing that again. Like it made enough
Yeah.
impact on me that I refuse to do that. And I celebrate that because I think that is a big deal because a lot of people don't have, like you said, the support from
Mm-mm.
or a healthy support system to help keep them on track. So
Mhm.
I that's incredible.
Having your family hold you accountable, I feel like that's a huge piece that a lot of these people are missing, right?
Hmm.
When they get out, they're back to, you know, maybe they don't have custody of their kids anymore. Their kids are somewhere else. They're trying to land a job. They don't have that 6-month flexibility to take a
Right.
deep breath and transition back into simple things like going to the store,
Right.
right? And so I think it was a little bit of all of those pieces for you to
For sure.
rebuild and get back to where you are.
For sure. And
And
with a lot of people getting out, they won't have anywhere to go except right back to where they were, right back to their same neighborhood with the same friends, with the same people, maybe the same
Mhm,
family members that, they were doing dirt with or whatever. And, you have to change your people, places, and things if you want to succeed, if you really want to change. Those three things have to change. And so you're really setting people up for failure because if you don't have an address to parole out to, they're not going to let you out.
mm,
Which, I mean, it makes sense. But if somebody wants to get out bad enough, they're reaching at whoever they can to get an address to go to. And if it's
mhm,
back in the same neighborhood with the same people, what do you think is going to happen? Like, how much
mm,
do you think how long do you really think they're going to stay clean if
mhm.
they're sleeping on their dope dealer's couch? You know,
right.
Yeah, because that was the only address.
that was the only address.
Damn.
So how was your path then for this part of your journey to get employment? Because that had to be difficult too, because you have to sign on every application. I'm a convicted felon.
It was God, like I said, God has had his hand on me the entire time. I got a job at a major auto parts chain. A buddy of mine was the um, district manager. He hired me. 2 weeks later, I put in to be a key holder so I could lock up at night and make like an extra dollar or two an hour or something. When I did that, it triggered something higher up in HR, and they told them to fire me as soon as I walked in the next day, that they never should have hired me. And of course, my buddy was apologetic, like he was, man, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that. That was the only hiccup I had. A month later, maybe, a friend of mine that I grew up with, we've known each other since we were like 14. He's the CFO at the company I work for now. And his mom texted my mom and said, "Oh my gosh, I just saw that Chris is out. If he needs a job, tell him to call Dannon," and gave my mom Dannon's number, which is her son. I called Dannon and he was like, "Yep, come up here and talk to him." And he hired me, and I started in the warehouse and have worked my way up a little bit, um, making over double what I was making when I started. So God's had his hand on me. Like, I realize that not everybody has it as easy as I do getting out.
Mhm,
Um, but also it's just a testament to how faithful God is.
mhm. Which is so good and helpful in your process, right? In your growth and your journey. But to Kelly's point, I mean, you think of all these people that don't have that
Yeah.
connection, even just normal, let's just not even talk about the convicted felon part. Normal job searching right now
Hmm.
is a shit show. Can
Yes,
I
it
say it?
Uh,
is.
Right?
that's
Yes.
an
Normal job
understatement.
searching. You
Yeah.
have to know somebody, right? You have to
Yeah.
know somebody, you have to have an in. That's just for normal Joe Schmoes to be able to find a job. And then to add that other layer of having to check that box, like you said, that hiccup that you had, they, they're you had the person, you knew the in, but then there was
Hmm.
that check in the box that maybe didn't happen that was supposed
Hmm.
to. Like that just adds to the layer of difficulty for folks getting out, even though you do have tremendous skills and you could do so many things. Now you have this crazy job search market and the have to check the box, and it
Mhm.
really just doesn't set people up for success. So
Not at all. And that's one of the big, I don't have the statistics on it, and I don't even know if there is one. Um, I would say, I'm not even going to guess, but a high percentage of the cause of recidivism is because somebody can't find a job that pays enough for them to live on.
yes.
Like, there's a ton of companies out there that hire felons. I always use Subway because I know a lot of guys that went to work for Subway, and that is amazing that they
Nice.
do that. But you come home, you got to, even if you're single, how in the hell are you supposed to make it on 10 or 12 bucks an hour, 40 hours a week, where your bring home is 300 bucks, 350 bucks? How are you supposed to do that?
Mhm.
Especially if you're used to, just say you were a drug dealer. That's the common one everybody uses. You're making money, you have all the things, you have a house, but now you can't even afford to pay rent. That's if you can even get an apartment or a house somewhere that somebody will rent to you, because you're a felon. So you have to check that box too. Um,
Mhm.
how
Right.
are you supposed to do that? So that
And
sends them right back to the streets doing the things they were doing before.
yeah, which
Mhm.
is so crazy because it is, and it's like they didn't choose to be on the revolving door of going in and out of prison,
Mhm.
but they've been put on paths that only take them to failure or
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
not being able to achieve. And one of the things that was standing out to me when you were saying that, I've interviewed hundreds of people in my career. The people that I always, and what's a shame that people just see felon and then your resume is like tossed to the side.
Mhm.
Um, but some of the greatest hires I've ever made were people who maybe didn't check all the boxes on the skill set, but they were driven, they were
Mhm.
hungry, they wanted to do something.
Yep.
Those were the best hires. And it's like
Yep.
if you could get in front of people, I guarantee they would have hired you. But it's like
Mhm.
you're X'd out before you even get a chance. And
Yeah.
that just upsets me because what we've talked about before too is you made a mistake in life.
Mhm.
Your event that caused you to go to prison was a mistake, and you've turned your
Mhm.
life around, and you shouldn't have to have the stigma attached to you forever. And that
Right.
I can also see how that would beat someone down.
It
And again,
does.
sending them back. Um, and here we do have a question from Kim. She said, she starts off with, Chris, congratulations on your freedom. You remember the first time that you felt life or your decisions had taken you to an unhealthy point,
Um,
as if you
it
can't
really
remember.
wasn't. Yeah, it really wasn't until I got I got arrested, got out on bond, and was out for a couple of years. Or was out. Yeah, I was out. I got probation initially, but but I was still doing dirt. That didn't
Mhm.
even matter. It wasn't until I got arrested again and knew I was going to prison because they were going to revoke my probation,
Mhm.
and I actually got still enough long enough to stay clean for more than a couple days at a time. Um, that really began to sink in. When you're out there doing that stuff and living that life, and it's crazy that so much happened I didn't do drugs, but for maybe 3 years, but just the huge impact that had, it wasn't like it was a lifelong thing,
Mhm.
but it really wasn't until I got forced stillness, forced solitude, because they had me in SEG in the county jail because that was the same jail I was a correctional officer at it's the same jail I worked at. So they had to put me in SEG. So I did have a TV though, thank God, but I'd had a lot of time just to sit and think and reflect. And that was really whenever all that stuff started sinking in. Oh, I really did mess up. Now the newness wore off. And like I told you, when I got to prison, it was like, I can still do that on the weekends. Um, but thankfully God intervened and was like, no, bro, you can't do that.
Yeah. But you were able to, you know, have that settle and unfortunately have that moment of, I mean, you were arrested and
Yeah.
that has led to your journey. And as I'm listening to you, it's probably a good thing that you were,
Oh,
because
definitely.
right? You
My
would
mama
have
was praying that I would get arrested, like praying that I would get arrested for
Yeah,
real.
it
But
saved
it
your
was, it
life.
was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah, which is, I
It's-
mean, it's so good to hear these conversations, as opposed to the ones like you were saying with that recidivism, and
mhm,
you get out, you don't have the right support system, you can't afford paying rent off of, sandwich money. So you
mhm,
go back to what you knew you could do to make some money,
mhm,
you get in trouble, you do it again, right? And
mhm.
and that cycle continues to happen. So a lot of it is a huge, I mean, I see a lot of it being a huge education piece, right? Like you're
Mhm.
almost like you're the unicorn. You weren't part of a
Yeah,
program that transitioned you
right,
out,
right.
right? Like you had some support from God, you had some support to know like, "Okay, I gotta get my shit together," right? I can't just do
Yep,
this on the weekends.
right.
Um, but that's not the case for everyone, so I'm glad that you're our unicorn. Um,
Yeah.
but
But I
that
also
education piece
recognize
too.
that too. Like
Mhm,
I see that it's not, I'm the exception and not the norm.
mhm,
Like
yeah.
this is not the way it normally is for people coming out.
Not at all, and especially, at that age, because you were still in your 20s, right, when that happened? Early
Yep.
20s?
I was 28 when I went to prison.
Hmm,
Okay. That's still very young, and to spend that
Yeah.
yeah,
much time in prison, because we also talked about this, young kids that make bad decisions when they're 17, 18, and they go away for 10, 15 years, and when they get out, same thing, drop you into society that you don't even recognize. You didn't even have a foundation to start with. How do you adjust? What do you do?
mhm,
It's so disheartening, quite honestly. It's like, what a
Yeah.
big epic fail, that there isn't more to help you get back into society and to change your patterns. Like, it's just dropping people out, and kids, because I talked to a few of them that they did get out and they started a program in Phoenix, to help other inmates that were released so that they could
Mhm.
give them the tools, the classes, what have you, to be able to get a job because they didn't know how to get a job. They were stealing cars.
mhm,
Yeah.
Um, and I just it sickens me, but I love that they have their program, and then your guest last night on your podcast, what how she turned her life around and is helping people get skill sets and things to get them back into the workforce is freaking amazing.
For sure.
So
yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely hope, and I'm so grateful I've been exposed to that as well, because I always just thought, why aren't there more resources? But I
Yeah.
also wasn't really sure where to look. I just know the people that I've been introduced to, and who I've met along the way. So I
Yeah.
think this is one of those conversations that can just really go on and go so deep in so many different directions.
Mhm.
yeah.
For sure.
Um, Although we could go in all of these directions, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it
There's not.
Yes,
a
we
lot of
can.
it we need it to be a conversation, we need to have the education piece, all of that. Um, Chris, while we do still have time though, I wanna hear about the production stuff because
Yes.
you're working
Okay.
full time, but you're also
Yep.
doing your own thing, right? This is what we do. Kelly and I know this. You gotta wear
Mhm.
multiple hats in life to
Yeah.
stay
Yes.
busy and
Yeah.
energized. So I wanna know where this came from, like, through your path of everything, like, how did this production stuff come from it, and what is it that you're doing?
So it started 2 years ago, like in March or April. LinkedIn had just launched the ability to live stream. I'd only been
Mhm,
on LinkedIn for like 3 or 4 months, and I saw a friend of mine. She had a guest on. They were just like talking and having a good time. There was no rhyme or reason to the show. And I thought, that looks like fun. I want to do that. You still had to apply for it back then. You couldn't just turn creator mode on. So I applied 3 or 4 times. Finally,
They're
yeah,
probably
it was
regretting
crazy.
it now. Kelly's
Yeah,
going
I know,
rogue.
right? Yeah, exactly. You know, these suckers, boy, they done taken over the internet.
Yeah.
Finally got it, and I just wanted to bring people onto my network that were cool and just have like a coffee chat with them, live. So that's how it started. In the meantime, a friend of mine, Nathan Winsenreed, he and I started in. So that show is called "So I Did a Thing." Um, Nathan and I had posted a little bit about, both of us had been felons or being felons, and just different topics, and just got received with overwhelming support from the LinkedIn community. And so he reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, man, I think we need to do something more. Do you want to start a live stream talking about ending the stigma?" And I did. So we started doing that. In the meantime, my shows were growing, the support was there, and I began to see, and more people were starting to live stream, and I absolutely love it. Like, I love live streaming. I love taking something. I love helping people with it. I love taking the concept of an idea and growing the show, giving them tips and tricks and all that stuff. And I also saw a lot of people that were live streaming and not doing it well at all. They made all the same mistakes I did starting out, but they either didn't ask questions or like they didn't grow. So it's still kind of terrible. So I was like, all right, how can I monetize this? How can I make some extra money doing this? So I decided to start producing. So, and what that means is like I run all my own shows. I do all the promotion, all the events, all the graphics, all the everything. Um, as a producer, all you have to do is find your guest. I'm not going to find your guest for you because I feel like as the host, you should pick who you want to have. But other than that, I do everything else. But also, what I was running into was a lot of people like me who were bootstrapping a business. And, it's not real cheap to have a producer every month do this kind of stuff. Um, a lot of people are bootstrapping their business or just starting out. They wanted to live stream and they wanted to do it well, but they didn't have, didn't have it in their budget to pay a producer 4 figures a month to produce their stuff for them. So that's when I started training people because, whenever I started this, when I started Hit Productions, I said, God, do it, take it wherever you want to take it. I want this to be in your will. And I was just talking to these people like constantly, like multiple calls a week. And I thought, okay, let me start training. I think God is kind of leading in this direction too, or wants me to do it because I wanted it to be kind of like a ministry too. So I started training people so I can either produce your shows for you, or we go through one-on-one and spend 4 or 5 weeks, depending on how fast you pick it up. And I show you the ins and outs of how to run Restream, how to, promote the show, best practices, equipment setup, some basic graphic stuff. Cause if you, and I use Canva for my stuff. So most people already know how to do that. Everything you need to know top to bottom to learn how to live stream. So I do that too. And then I run boot camps every so often where I do it in a group training where it's even cheaper than the one-on-one, but you're in a group setting.
That's awesome. How often do you do those?
So I've only done one, and it was at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And I have tried twice since to get another one going and didn't have any interest shown in it. So, and I think it was just because I caught it at the right time. I was promoting it all at the end of last year as, start 2023 live streaming. And everybody was like, yeah, I want to start 2023 live streaming. And then I kind of hit a burnout. So I really wasn't promoting myself or the shows. I wasn't streaming. I took April off from doing anything on social media, just because I was burnt out. So I'm just now starting to get back into posting and commenting and streaming and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to, I don't know. I hadn't set a date yet, but I need to start promoting another boot camp because it's time.
Yes. And I mean, I'm absolutely happy to help promote that.
Yeah,
And I
same here.
probably need to be in a class. But I'm learning. And I'm with you, Chris. Like I mean, at the beginning of the year, most or most not know that I was just praying to live louder in my purpose. I just felt like I know I'm supposed to be doing more. And I was on a phone call with Donald Cohen, 2 days later, I was on a LinkedIn Live. I've been doing his shows now regularly for 5 months, and then wanted to start the Awesome Journey because it's such a different approach. Because
Mhm.
it's more about really diving into the person's journey.
Mhm.
Um, and the interactiveness is much, we want questions, of course, but I think what people tend to do a lot here, and I got that a lot of the last two as well, is, hey, we were just listening to this story. Like it was so great just to sit back and listen. Um,
Mhm.
and not really sending messages. Like they're just like, I'm just taking it all in because this
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
such great information. So I
Yep.
think that's so wonderful that you got into it. So anyone do reach out to him. We'll share it in the comments after the show as well to be sure to connect with Chris. And we
Yes.
will be your biggest cheerleaders, Chris, of
Thank
course,
you.
for anything you do. So with that being said, because we are coming up on the top of the hour, is there anything else that you wanted to cover or wrap up with? Um, Shameless promo is totally fine too.
Yeah, if I can help you at all with live streaming, if you have any questions about it, let me know. Um, I don't charge anything for an initial consultation call, just to kind of see where you're at and see what your goals are. And if I can give you a few ideas, then that's cool too. And if you don't ever, or if you don't ever use me, that's cool too. I honestly just want to see people get started live streaming.
Mhm.
Love
And
that.
I
And just
hope, I
remember
hope,
for me, I can talk very fast, so I can ask you a lot of stuff in
um, I do have a show on Monday nights at 7 Central. This
Ooh.
one, so I'm alternating now because it got to be too much to try and do two shows and work full time and try and grow a business. So I'm alternating, usually quarterly now, between So I Did a Thing and Ending the Stigma.
Mhm.
They're both on Monday nights at 7. Right now, I'm doing Ending the Stigma, where we talk about the stigmas associated with felons, have conversations like I had with Melanie last night, with people that have either been in prison or maybe they hadn't been locked up, but maybe they've struggled with addiction,
Mhm.
which still leads to that's a whole nother set of stigma involved with that too. Or maybe they've worked for an organization that helps people coming out of prison, or a family member that anybody that's been touched by addiction or incarceration, we'll bring on and just have a conversation with them about it. The goal of the show is to end the stigma associated with it,
Mhm.
but also just to kind of open people's eyes and realize that not all felons are, they don't all look like the people you expect them to look like. You wouldn't expect that I'm a felon walking down the street.
Mhm.
The people I hang out with that are felons, you wouldn't expect that. I have a friend that, he has a PhD and he's an adjunct professor for one of the colleges here in Texas. Um, and while we do recognize that not everyone wants to change,
Mhm.
those of us that do are going to be some of your best workers. And if we can just get people to get over the fact, 1 in 3 people in the U.S. have either been on probation or been in prison, have been justice involved somehow. That's a pretty big chunk.
Mhm.
Um, if we can just get people to realize that, and that we're here, like not saying it's right that we went to prison, but we made a mistake and we got out, give us a chance. So that's kind of the goal of the show.
And
I
it was
love that.
great. I'm just telling you, it's so good. I encourage everyone to check it out. I was moved last night and amazed and prideful and all of those things. It was just incredible. So definitely check it out, support it. And Kendra, what are your wrap
Thank
up
you.
thoughts?
My last thoughts before you wrap up. First off, Chris, this is so awesome just to, like you said, have this conversation. Everybody has made mistakes in their life. Felons just happen to get caught the day that they did it.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
difference.
exactly.
I've done a lot of shit that don't tell my mom, but I've done a
Yeah, I
lot of
know.
stuff that I'm like, "Whoo,
Yeah.
I skated by a lot when I was a teenager."
Yes.
And right? And so think about that. Everybody has made mistakes.
Yeah.
Right.
These folks that go to prison and go to jail, they get caught. Some
They
of
got
them,
caught.
maybe they should. There's some stuff out
Right.
there that I'm like, "You should
Exactly.
stay there," right? But
Right.
some of the
Right.
things when
For
it's
sure.
like right? But some of these things when it just happened to be the bad day, you got caught, but for somebody like you, it made the difference. It needed to
Hmm.
happen. It made a shift. You're now gonna be one of the best workers anybody can have. I have a couple of introductions that I'm going to make to you after this of folks
Okay.
that I think would be beautiful conversations for you to have that are in
Cool.
this space of educating and ending the stigma. Um, please share with us when you're going to do a boot camp.
I
Especially
will.
Kelly and I are both very connected in the business community,
Yeah.
and there's some folks that I could see wanting to tap into that space but don't know how.
Mhm.
So let us know how we can be a cheerleader for you in that
I
side of
appreciate
things.
that. I will for
Um,
sure.
Mondays, I love that you do those on Mondays. I'm a big fan of doing things on Mondays to make them a good start to the week. So
Mhm.
I'll share that as well. And then my only last thought is, how do you have such a nice beard? All nice
Lots
and
of product.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Love it. Love it. Love
That's
I
it.
appreciate
that's
that.
all I got.
Pretty great, Kindra. And man, it's sometimes it always goes by so fast, and I'm just
So fast, doesn't it?
so inspired by your story. And one of the things that I envisioned when I wanted to bring this all together was because most maybe notice or don't notice the T in the awesome journey is a cross. And
Mhm.
because I believe we're so focused on a destination that we sometimes forget to focus on the journey. And the
Yeah.
journey isn't always beautiful, pretty, sometimes
Most of the
downright
time it's not. Yep.
ugly. And but it still can take you to the most wonderful destinations in the end. And you
Mhm.
are a prime example of that. I'm so grateful to have had you today, honored to be able to share your story. And man, I'm looking forward to what we can do together next
Yeah.
because
Thank
I
y'all for
feel
having
there's,
me. I appreciate it.
yeah. And we will have you back because Christy was definitely upset to not be here. And I
I know
said,
she originally had asked me to give her some dates, and I was like, okay, I will. And she said it was at 1:11, and I was like, man, I'm going to have a hard time swinging that because I'm on my lunch break right now. Um, but I wasn't thinking it was 1:11 Eastern, and I was like, that's going to work. And about the time I was getting ready to message her, Kelly messaged me and was like, oh my God, can you come on Tuesday? And I was like, cool, I'll be
that's awesome. Things always work out the way they're supposed to.
there.
So, everyone, please, we look forward to seeing you next week with our guest, Amy Looper. And Kindra will still be here with us because it's one more week that Christy will be away. Um, and just go out and enjoy the journey because it is awesome. See you next time.
Bye, y'all.